Hi, my name's Steven.
Hi, I'm April.
This is the 3 Pi Squared ABA Business Leaders Podcast, where we discuss topics on how to create and grow an ethical and sustainable ABA practice.
Together, Steven and I owned a 7-figure ABA practice that provided both clinic and in-home services.
3 Pi Squared has helped over 900 ABA practices start up and expand with our comprehensive products and services geared specifically to ABA. Now, let's get to the podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to ABA Business Leaders Podcast, brought to you by 3 Pi Squared. I'm April.
I'm Steven.
And today with us, we have a very special guest, Jeff Morelli from Silna. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on the podcast, and I've been looking forward to it for quite some time.
So exciting. We've had numerous conversations with Jeff and his team, and it's been great getting to know you and your team. So why don't you tell our listeners a little about yourself?
Yeah, happy to. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've been in New York for about 4 years now, and started my career over a decade ago, actually in the ABA space, helping build a data collection platform for BCBAs. So allowing therapists to take session notes on any mobile device or tablet and then generate reports out of that. Ended up selling that business, and in hindsight, a little ahead of our time, these digital AI note-taking scribes is now one of the hotter categories, but I think it identified the right inefficiency and an opportunity to drive better outcomes within the ABA field. And then after that, went over and joined this company, TrueWork, where I worked for about 6 years and grew it from 4 people to 120, and really helped build a financial infrastructure layer to help verify how much individuals make during a lending process, to say, do they work here? How much do they make? And what we had to do is use technology with a really high degree of accuracy to figure out how we automated emails, faxes, and phone calls for any employer across the entire country. And so, we got to a point where over 50% of those verifications were completed without any human involvement, but our accuracy and turnaround time was actually much faster than the status quo. And there's a lot of similarities between the problems that we solved at that last company and then what we're solving here at Silna, which is all these upfront insurance workflows where we have to email, fax, phone call any payer in the country to verify insurance verifications and authorizations. So, really excited to be back in the ABA space, and we've been working on Silna for a couple of years now. So Silna is creating what we call the Care Readiness platform. And what a Care Readiness platform does is it handles all the insurance workflows between a provider and a payer in the upfront RCM workflow. So that includes benefit checks, eligibility checks, and prior authorizations. When you look at the healthcare landscape today, over 50% of the time that a claim is denied actually has to do nothing with the claim submission process, but has to do with all these upfront insurance workflows where you didn't know the patient was eligible to receive care, you didn't have a prior authorization on file. And this is really problematic, specifically within the ABA industry, because there's ABA specific benefits. There's so many carve outs and exclusions and limitations. And we are natively an ABA business. That is where we started Silna. That is our main focus today. We also do help with physical health, specifically pediatric physical health. So one of the biggest changes that I've seen within the ABA world from 10 years ago to today is you're also seeing these practices offer ABA along with speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. And so what our goal here is allowing practices to spend more time on providing the best care possible and less time on hold with Aetna or Cigna or United. And typically this has been one of the most time-consuming, manual, and error-prone processes that a provider has to deal with. And that's what we're really focused on tackling. I think there's a lot of solutions that people have built for general healthcare and then have tried to retrofit that into ABA, and it just doesn't work. And, I think we're different here where we started with ABA, and that is still our core business. And I think in this space, trust matters more than anything else. So we have to make sure that we do all of these processes really, really well.
So other than your background, your other businesses that you owned and worked in, what inspired Silna? What inspired this idea?
Yeah, totally. I don't have a clinical background myself, but I've always been around it. So my mom was a nurse for over 40 years, and she was a true caregiver. She just loved working directly with patients and had all these opportunities to move into upper management, and ultimately just wanted to remain as close as she possibly could with those patients. And, I saw the last 5-10 years of her career, she got quite burnt out, where it felt like she was having to spend a lot of time on administrative workflows, providing care that was the most efficient, but maybe not driving the best patient outcomes. And, that's something that was just in the back of my mind. I really couldn't stop thinking about it. And then one of my family members also ran a hospital system. And so when I was talking with them over the holidays a couple of years ago and gaining their perspective of how much the landscape of the healthcare system within the U.S. have shifted and how much time and energy is now being spent on this administrative effort sort of back and forth, it really opened up my eyes. And that was the same time that OpenAI had started to come onto the scene with ChatGPT. And, it felt like there was this problem that you couldn't solve 5 years ago. And, it's such a dynamic problem that you needed this advancement in AI and LLMs to be able to come and solve this more dynamic insurance workflow that's constantly changing. And I actually do think prior authorizations is the right instrument for the healthcare world, where you just want to constantly prove that care is medically necessary. I think there's been so much advancement within the healthcare world over the last 10 years that it's really hard to determine what is the best path of care for that patient at any given time. And it makes sense up front to say, this is why I want to provide these procedures. Here's how I'm going to measure success. This is the outcomes that I'm driving towards. But I think that process has become very inefficient for both the provider and the payer. And Silna is trying to eliminate that inefficiency really on both sides.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, I honestly liked pre-auths because that meant they would authorize the hours that we were allowed to have.
Most likely.
Yes, most likely. But like there was no are they going to approve this? Is there going to be some weird denial if we don't get an authorization? So, I mean, it was nice really for me on the admin side of things personally.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to that point, I think if you invest in a care readiness platform along with, a strong RCM function within your business, you should have more confidence than ever before that you're going to be paid back for the procedures and services that you're providing. And I think if you're not investing in these front end sort of insurance workflows, you're playing much more of this reactive sort of whack-a-mole game where you're providing services, you're waiting to see if you're going to get paid back. And then sometimes you have to either fight those claim denials or have to rework that claim as well, which is quite inefficient for that practice. And so what you want to have is a degree of confidence that before you even provide any sort of service that you're going to get paid out. And that's why Silna's not just offering prior authorizations. Along with that, as I mentioned, we have benefit checks specific to ABA, which is covering exclusion with limitations, prior authorization requirements, hard visit limits, copay, deductible. And then we also have this insurance monitoring system where for all patients, we'll check to make sure that the patient is still eligible to receive care. And then we'll actually notify the provider if they've recently gained primary or secondary insurance that they're unaware of. And, to this point, it's one of the most costly and risky things that you can do in your business is you provide service for 3 weeks and turns out that the patient just disenrolled from Medicaid and you're not actually going to be paid out for those services. And you have states like Colorado where they actually disenroll from Medicaid on the 1st and the 15th every month. And so it's really dangerous if you're providing this month-long service only to find out that they're no longer eligible, or you go to submit a claim and it turns out they now have primary insurance that you were unaware of, and that's who you should be billing through. And so again, we want to just get to this proactive state so you're not having to spend all these resources on the back end.
Yeah, I think there was so much about so much of a learning process. I mean, because when we started, mandates were just rolling out when we started before the mandates were rolling out.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing.
And we were learning as we went, right? And even from the beginning, though, it's, probably, I feel like one of the first issues we had with insurance was just our poor management of it, because family would change, let's say the family's on the dad's insurance and then the dad's company changes insurance or loses their job or switches jobs or for whatever, just normal life reason, the insurance changed and we weren't notified. The parent didn't even think to notify us. Why would they do that? And we were we don't we've got their insurance now. It's in the file. We're done. Maybe we'll check it. Then we did get processes in place where we checked it at every reauth, every 6 months, right? Uh-huh. But that's 6 months of time that things can change. And then so typically it was not until the denials started rolling in, weeks after weeks of
Yes.
services have been done, like weeks later. And, you know, even back then we weren't even submitting insurance on a regular basis, definitely not daily. So you can imagine the like terror and fear, like I started to get my heart's like kind of racing a little just thinking about those days.
PTSD.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So like the thought of having some kind of system that's taking care of that for you, like that's huge.
Yes.
That's like bigger than huge, right?
Yes.
So, you know, that was one of the first things when we met you guys. And you started telling us more about, you know, what you're doing. And, you know, like, it's, you know, when businesses are like collaborating and like figuring out how we can support each other, it's like, okay, what's the pain point? You know, how are you solving that? You know, how are you helping the customer and things like that? And, you had me at that one, you know.
Yeah, that one for sure, right? That's like thousands of dollars saved multiple times a year just because, you know, everybody gets busy, right? And you just forget to make sure, hey, do we still have your current, mom gets a job and now there's a new insurance in the mix, right? The waiver finally goes through and now Medicaid's in. And then the other thing that I really liked about, what you guys are offering was that really transparent, like a sheet that you provide, which tells the copays, the deductibles, and it really gives that visibility for the families because again, you're a BCBA, you're not an insurance specialist. And so it's like, I don't even know what a copay is. What are you talking about? I have to tell this person what a copay is. So like just getting that information in a really easy to understand way that can help the families going through a really crazy time anyway, right? Just when you first get a diagnosis and you don't, you're going to come to my house for 30 hours a week. What are you talking about? Like, we're just not like, it's a lot. It can be very overwhelming. So to have that very easy to read and understandable is very helpful.
And if it makes you feel better, you know, we operate in 48 states today. We work with providers all the way from sole proprietors with 11 kiddos up to providers that operate in multi-state, multi-specialty, quite large organizations. And the industry standard is not checking eligibility at the beginning of every single month. Everyone knows that they should and they would like to be able to, but it's a really hard problem because you can't staff against it, right? It's the single point in time. And so if you are doing it, what you're doing is a lot of times you're shifting your internal billing resources that for the first 3 to 5 days of every month, you're checking all patients and you're logging into all these different portals. And then what's happening is your claims are also being submitted later because what you've done is you've pulled over this internal resource that should actually be focusing on a different function within that business. And so it's a really hard problem that quite honestly, if you're just doing it with people, it doesn't quite make sense to actually do it. And that's why you need technology and automation where we get all of these done typically within the first 1 or 2 days of every single month. And then, yeah, I think to your point here is that, you know, the report, our goal is that a family or any individual should know exactly what their financial responsibility might be and what their coverage is. The last thing that this individual is thinking about when they're going through this, you know, journey in their life is to say, hey, let me call you and notify you that I just changed insurance or that I just got a job and I actually have Cigna. Like that's so easy to fly by the wayside. But, you know, what Silna does is we actually ingest all of the rate tables that providers have. And then in this benefit check report, you know, it includes things that you mentioned, copay, coinsurance, deductible, has a glossary that explains what all those terms mean. But also at the very top, we provide a cost estimate. So what your cost of assessment is going to be, what each additional visit or day of service is going to be. And it makes it a lot easier for the family to say, when am I going to hit that out-of-pocket max? Right. Which especially in ABA is really critical to say, okay, but how much does this truly mean for me on a financial standpoint? And you should be able to say, yeah, by April 1st, we think you're going to hit your out-of-pocket max, and then there's no more financial responsibility that you have to cover. And I think that's really hard if you're doing it yourself today and going into portals, and then you have to go into each rate table for each payer and try to figure that out.
Yeah. And you know, we work with a lot of smaller companies, so it's not like they have a team of people.
Like
right?
They are the person.
They are the person. So like, you know, it's just, hey, I'm supposed to be doing 500 things, and like that, and so calling up insurance is not happening to see if we have the right insurance information.
Or
it's
if it
just
does,
not.
if it does happen, then like what's not getting happened?
Yeah, totally.
Not getting what's
exactly.
not happening.
Yes. That should be happening. Yes. Yeah, totally. Yep.
Well, so Jeff, you're talking a lot about like the technology behind it all, and so what does the human like experience look like? Because I know that you guys do more than just like, it's not just like tech. It's not complete tech, right? There's some human aspect here too. And you're navigating all the complexities of like the payers and the rates and just the whole world of insurance itself.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, how Silna views what we're offering to the market is a full solution that says it doesn't matter if we can automate this through technology or if we have to have an individual on our end who has years of experience with an ABA to complete that task. We're going to get you 100% of the information you need to financially clear that patient for care. And so when it comes to benefit checks, there are certain benefit checks that you can automate. So if you're dealing with Medicaid programs or certain MCOs, a lot of times you can drive that automation. We have direct integrations with clearinghouses and direct payer portals. But for a lot of the commercial plans within ABA, you can only get a subset of that information through any portal or what's called an EDI 271 response. And then you actually have to fall back and call to get that information. And that's where we have experts with years of experience who are calling in to get that information. Same thing on the prior authorization side is, we have incredible technology that can actually review all of your supporting documentation. So treatment plans, diagnoses, referrals, whatever that might be. And it analyzes it to say, are we missing any signatures? Is the patient's name correct? Are the service dates correct? All things that may end up leading to an authorization denial downstream. And then it can actually fill out that authorization form, because I think it's really important to think about the status quo in this space and then what Silna is offering, which is there's so many workflows that Silna covers that are quite error prone if you're only doing this as a human, which is you review these 40 pages of supporting documentation and you have to transcribe that into an authorization form, and then you have to fax it or email it or submit it on a portal. And if you make a mistake anywhere in that process, it may end up being denied. And so as we talk about these practices that are smaller, a lot of times what we see is the owner themselves is doing these insurance workflows, or at least assisting in them. And so their time should be spent on patients, not on these authorization forms. And as we've done some case studies, what we found is that each Medicaid authorization on average takes 30 minutes. Each commercial authorization takes an hour and a half. And then, TRICARE notoriously, is just more hoops that you have to jump through. On average takes, 2.7 hours. And so if you're doing something that is a manual process for over 3 hours, the likelihood of making a mistake within that process is quite high. And so our goal is to drive automation in these processes to improve accuracy and speed more than anything else. But we never shy away from having a human involved if it means that we have a higher degree of confidence that the thing was done correctly.
It takes the village, including the tech part of that village.
And just taking care of pre-auth, it's so much work, right? And it's like work that who likes to do that? Nobody likes to do that, right? So I think taking care of that, especially for the BCBAs, where they honestly have no business doing that, right? Like, okay, you can spend a half hour doing this wonderful thing, or you can actually help your families have a better quality of life, right? So I just, it's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
And so it's nice. And that's all of these newer systems, right, coming in with AI. I mean, that's kind of my hope, is that it improves quality of life and it doesn't go the Terminator way.
Yeah, well, that's you're so funny. That's kind of leads me to my next question. There are newer, companies popping up, and like AI is becoming, more and more integrated as we explore this whole new world. And I'm old enough to remember when Google became a thing, so like AI is the next Google, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
But many ABA owners are still hesitant about switching to new systems. So, what advice would you give, your general ABA owner, when considering a platform like Silna?
Yeah, I think that just in general, it's really hard to evaluate new platforms within the healthcare space. Healthcare is a very challenging space to operate in. There is a lot of complexity and nuances and regulations that you need to operate within. And so, first, I think is making sure that you're working with a company that truly understands ABA and is not just trying to build and automate this for all of healthcare, because ultimately I think that's where we've seen providers feel the most burned or sort of have developed a lack of trust, is that these solutions kind of fit 80% of their needs, but the 20% were so severe that it was just easier to do it in-house. So that's really the first piece. And then the second piece, I think, quite honestly, is how well do they truly know ABA and how well do they actually know the workflows that they're talking to you about? And so, at Silna, we think everything comes down to trust, and we believe we can go toe to toe with any provider in the country and know more about their payers and their insurance workflows than anyone else. And so what we're actually going to start developing here is a monthly blog post where we just update industry trends. And, there's a lot of these Facebook groups out there where providers are joining and asking each other insurance questions because they can't figure out how to get to the bottom of that. Silna wants to actually start hosting a forum on our website where you can come to us and ask questions and we answer all those for you. So even if you don't use Silna, we want to show that we truly just care about solving this problem. And, beyond that, that's the reason we offer a free trial of Silna. And especially here with the partnership, with 3 Pied Squared, is that the best way to see can Silna actually do this or not is put our money where our mouth is. And, it's hard to evaluate vendor that has a shiny website and a shiny tech, but then you end up using it and it just kind of falls short. And so we like to prove how good we are. And I think that's reflected as well with our reviews on G2 Crowd, which is the top website that customers use to rate vendors that they work with. And Silna is the number 1 prior authorization company. And so, a lot of times I like to tell our customers is don't take it from us, take it from your peers and go and hear, the impact that Silna has driven to other individuals. So I think if you're operating in this space, you just need to do a lot more due diligence, talk to customer references, read reviews, and then actually try to use the product before you sign any sort of commitment, because otherwise I think that's how you end up kind of getting stuck with the wrong solution.
Well, congratulations to that.
Thank you.
That's exciting.
Yeah. How does one start if they're like, okay, I'll try this thing? Like, how quickly do they get into the system? Are we talking, is it going to take 2 months to get it set up? Or like, you know what I mean? How can you, if you have 15 kids, you already have a biller, what does that look like in real life?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, everyone is acutely aware of the pain point of switching EHRs, and that is just because there's so much data and critical workflows that flow through those systems that it is a very hard transition. I think everyone is doing a great job on it today. It's just a very complex problem, but we know that practices and providers are busier than ever, and so they can't look at a new solution that might take 3 months to implement. And so with Silna, it's a matter of weeks. Any provider who reaches out on our website, you could probably get up and running with Silna in 2 to 3 weeks. And, I would say the active time on their end to implement Silna is 5 to 7 hours. It's quite minimal. A lot of the work we're doing for you. So we're creating your instance, we're uploading your TIN and your NPI and the payers you work with. And so from day one, Silna just mirrors your practice and there's no actual upfront work that you have to do on your end. So we try to make it quite easy for these providers. Otherwise, I think it's always that would be nice, but let's do it in the future. And we want to make sure it's almost less work to use Silna than it is to do 3 authorizations. And I think that's a pretty fair trade-off for how we think about it. And then, I think this problem just kind of scales exponentially. If you're thinking about offering any sort of physical health services, if you're ever thinking about expanding into a new state, you have to learn all these new authorization workflows. And then on top of that is, I think the biggest risk is this is a dynamic problem that constantly changes. So even if you've done a great job teaching this to someone within your organization for how to handle these, the process changes. And then if that individual leaves your practice, they typically leave with all of the knowledge in their head. And then you're stuck having to figure out this critical workflow that if you don't solve, you won't get paid. But, what we're seeing a lot of times, I'd say one of my recommendations is even if you don't use Silna, make sure all the individuals who are doing these insurance workflows have created a really strong internal wiki that you can say for Aetna, for a concurrent authorization or an assessment authorization, this is what you have to do, because you can end up in a really tough spot if all of a sudden that expertise is gone on vacation for 3 weeks or ends up taking another job for any reason.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it is. It's constantly changing. It's hard to keep up with. I mean, we do billing trainings, and that's the first thing that we talk about, right? We're not going to tell you how to do this for Texas Medicaid. That's not what this is about. We're going to give you some general ideas, because that could change in like 3 days, right? And so you never know, and it's really, and that's part of the training. Is it's like, how do I find out those pieces that when they do change, I can change. And it's this cat and mouse game that it gets old real quick. And who wants to do it? Nobody wants to do it. I don't know of any. It's a horrible thing.
Horrible, huh?
It's terrible. Dealing with insurance is awful, and anything that can be removed from having to do that, right? Because these are the hardest parts. Like, I can submit claims. That's not a problem. It's this thing that you just have to constantly keep up with. And if you don't, that's going to be the exact time that somebody's going to change their insurance.
The expense, the risk is
so
really
much.
high.
We did that several times where it's just like, oops, we're going to eat this cost now, right? It sucks. And so why do it?
Yeah. I think at that point, that's one of the largest misconceptions that I see happening within healthcare in general, is everyone really focuses within RCM. And rightfully so. That's the function in how you get paid, right? You submit a claim and then you get paid back from the payer. However, again, the main reason that claims are denied are these upfront insurance workflows. And if you're not doing authorizations, all of your claims will be denied. It does not matter if you have the best RCM solution in the world. Yet when I look at how providers operate, a lot of times they view this function of, how can I do this as cheaply as possible? Or how am I not investing in these upfront workflows, right? Because it feels like something that you just kind of have to do. Yet I actually think what you should be doing is investing in this function where if you don't do it, you will not get paid for those services. And so, you should never have a risk in your business that one person is sick, one person quits, whatever it is, and all of a sudden that jeopardizes the livelihood of your whole practice. Yep. And again, if you don't do these upfront insurance workflows, well, I think you're faced with one of the toughest decisions as a practice owner, which is, turns out this patient was not eligible to receive care. We provided $8,000 of service. Are we going to put that into the family to pay? And that doesn't seem very fair, right? They didn't necessarily do anything wrong here, right. But as a practice, you've already paid that staff to provide those services. And so, we're seeing a lot of providers have to just write off and eat that cost, but that adds a lot of financial stress to their system and their situation. Yes. And so, ultimately what you want to be avoiding is any unexpected medical bills for those families. And then you also want to have to avoid any sort of loss where it may impact the livelihood of your business. But I think I see a lot of folks trying to figure out how this is almost just like an afterthought and not something they're necessarily investing in.
That was us. It was an afterthought, right? And I don't even know if it was an afterthought when we first started. It was like, oh wow, this can actually happen, right?
Well, it wasn't until like it happened.
Yes, exactly.
And then we were this is a thing.
Even after that, like it's like you said, like
it did not start a ball of change. It did not start the change of, we must put the system in place. That wasn't until a few years later where we started like realizing we needed to get all of these things out of these people's brains, out of our brains, write it on a paper. Put those systems in place and figure out how we're gonna make it work. Yeah.
And then is it more difficult, or is it exactly the same process if you have like, I've got a clinic in Texas and I've got one in New Mexico and I've got one in Florida. Like, is it any different, or does it all work the same?
It all works the same. And, because we operate in 48 states today, we work with over 1,000 payers, both commercial and government. We're already familiar with most systems that companies and providers use today. And so, it's a large advantage here where you could operate within 5 states and we can handle those 5 states. And so the only thing that we just need to make sure we're handling within that implementation setup is if you have any unique setup for your TIN and NPI, if these are all under one corporate structure, how you're kind of contracting credentialed with these different payers, which is something we're very familiar with, but, is critical to making sure you get right before you actually handle any of these insurance workflows. But the timeline doesn't change. It's still a matter of weeks, not months.
My favorite part, honestly, is the scalability of it, right? Like this is not something that you have to worry about. So you don't have to hire anybody to do it, right? Like it's not like, okay, we open up a new clinic. Now we need somebody else to take care of this. It's just done, right? And so it's just a worry that, again, pre-auths are horrible. It's all bad. I don't know what to say.
You're grumpy pants today.
Insurance is really hard, right? It's really hard. And it's like your clinicians just shouldn't have to worry about it, right? Like they do. I get that they have to. I get it that it's important, but it's not like knowing how Aetna runs or Optum runs is going to allow me to provide higher quality of services. Do you know what I mean?
It will help you provide higher quality services if you put that within how you run your business, like if you take into account that information. But I see what you're saying though, because, most people did not come into this field thinking they were going to have to understand the ins and outs of insurance and keep up with these like tedious tasks that a little mistake could cost a lot of money. And so, there might be a few, let me know if you're one of these people who really enjoy the ins and outs of insurance and like doing all these pieces. Like I want to hear about it.
Doesn't exist.
But if they do, we're hiring. So I
was just about to say, Jeff might want to meet you if you're one of those people. So don't discount that, but no. But on your average ABA practice, I don't think that if you're like, oh, I really want to get into the nitty gritty of insurance and handle all of these pieces, I'm going to go apply to ABA practice. Probably not, right? Like they're going to look into someone like Jeff.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, like seriously though, like not like, but like this, I think is probably the hardest part of the insurance billing piece of it. And I feel if I had that, I could have kept doing the billing for longer than I did.
Oh,
do you know what I
really?
mean? Because like, again, submitting the claim is not the problem. Even working through the denials, once you have somebody's email, it doesn't really, it's this piece. It's the, I have to connect with the BCBA. We have to do that piece of it to get the pre-auth in. When are you doing? Like, you just don't have to worry about that anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is the worst part of it.
Well, so I have a question. What kind of quality assurance do you guys have? How do you because I know I'm sitting here thinking, okay, you're telling me just
dealing with 1,000 funders is a lot.
It is a lot.
It has to be a lot.
You hand it over, okay, here's take it. Because that's another thing that we talk to our listeners about is like, you still have to understand the processes and you still have to check in. You still have we're all still humans here, right? Like, and no matter who you're working with, there is some level of you can't just put your head in the sand. You still have to check in with people. You still have to, know what to look for to make sure that things are going in the right way. Right. So, what kind of quality assurance do you guys have? And what's your recommendation for the listener for how do you check in with Silna or other people other programs that you're enrolled in, or, to know that, hey, I can trust that the things, not just trust, but I can also see that things are happening the way they're supposed to happen.
Yeah, 100%. It really is such a tough problem, right? And I think there's a reason historically and up until this point, no one has solved prior authorizations. And it's not because people haven't identified that there's a cool opportunity to go and solve this and make a company around it. It's because you genuinely could not have solved this without AI and LLMs. We have an advantage where the more volume we have come through the system, the better our system gets, especially from a QA and accuracy standpoint. And so, we've now cleared over 50,000 patients for care. And with that is all these authorizations where we can start to use all this historical data and volume to train our system and say, hey, here are the top reasons that claims have been denied. Here are the top reasons that you have any sort of kickback or have to rework an authorization. Here's all the areas that you're most likely to be error prone. And then you can build really tight quality assurance programs around that to say, this is our expected value and range for any given field or any given task. If it falls outside of that range, then you should actually escalate this to an individual to come and be manually involved and intervene in that process. At the same time, I think you have to understand what processes you have a high degree of confidence in doing correctly, and then which processes are most likely in an error to result. And in that case, you really want to make sure you have almost a, double quality assurance program where you can have one person do it or one system complete it, and then a second person who's just reviewing that. And so, at Silna, we have an entire quality assurance team and technology system in place that reviews everything that's been done historically to make sure that there's, no mistakes that's been in that work before we actually submit it to a payer. So, I think you want to make sure that you're learning from any, changes or mistakes that happened in the past, and then you're able to use like the more volume makes our system better. And to that point, it's also a value where if you handle more volume than anyone else, you can notice trends and changes before anyone else. And so certain funders, payers will change the authorization process. They'll change the number that you need to fax to or whatever that might be. And, I think most providers are not necessarily going to payer bulletins to say, hey, for authorizations, you now need to use this number. Instead, what they're doing is they're maybe submitting 3 or 4 authorizations only to find out that they've been kicked back because they're using the wrong contact information. They have to rework those. Silna is able to use technology that actually scrapes all of these bulletin boards and can update our system when there's been a change in how anything should be submitted. And then along with that is anytime we notice a change, it updates what we have is called payer intelligence, which is the routing for any authorization for any plan for, any authorization type. And that way you're making sure that you're catching this mistake up front versus, again, everyone is operating typically in a more reactive state, which is let's just do it how we've been doing it historically. And if it no longer works, we'll wait until it's denied, and then we'll have to update our operating system.
Yeah, I don't think you had to be involved in that part of it. Yeah,
and
you're very lucky.
I wasn't.
Very lucky individual.
I wasn't. In fact, I just posted something. I just responded to a post in our business leaders group about like budgeting and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, I'm just going to be completely vulnerable here and say that before Steven came on, I was giving away free services. And part of that was because I was like avoiding having to go to families asking for money. So like, 100%. I was sheltered. I got to really focus in on the clinical end, but I also can completely respect and understand that a lot of people in my shoes were and are all of wearing multiple hats and are having to figure that out simultaneously as they're dealing with all the other things. So
especially new companies starting out, like this is one of the big pain points is like, I guess I need to send this off in and see if it gets rejected because nobody can tell me exactly how to do it. Right. Like, and so I'll just throw it and see what happens.
Do you remember that we had one payer, and maybe it's still this way? But I had one payer who you had to fax in something and then you got a number. I don't know if that still happens. It's almost like, when you go to the deli department and you take a number to get a ticket. Yeah, you would get it. And it was this whole, so to even it was bizarre.
It's funny. I love it. It's a really fun system. It's a really hard problem to solve.
He's going to start taking it personally. You're like, this is
no. I love the perspective. It's like one person's pain is another person's pleasure. And, it's a really, really fun dynamic problem to solve. And when you start to solve it, you can see this reward. And, while it's a lot of hard work, we actually are starting to see with some customers that using Silna has led to better clinical outcomes. And, when you have these clinicians that are having to focus on all of these administrative tasks, they are not spending as much time as possible on just like, what is the best treatment plan here? What is the best plan of care? And, that makes it all worth it. So, it's fun to go and figure out all these insurance nuances and intricacies and solve these challenges, because at the end of the day, if you can actually drive better patient outcomes, I think that's what everyone is striving for in the space.
I love it. You're like an insurance super sleuth.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And
I just have one more curious question.
Okay,
sure. Are you partnering with any billing companies at this point? Just like helping them? Because I know there are a lot of billers out there that, again, they have to deal with this too.
Oh, right? That's true.
It's a great question. So we are not formally working with any billing companies today. We are exploring them. We have a lot of providers that are using modern billing solutions, and Silna is sort of this product suite that they're implementing. We have not announced it yet, but we are working with a couple of EHRs, so this can be more seamlessly integrated within that ecosystem and work as well. But yeah, I think naturally over time, what we're seeing is some of these billers have a really strong RCM function and process, and then either do not offer prior auths and benefit checks, or they have a team that's doing it themselves internally. And those billers are now exploring to say, hey, can we actually just implement Silna to be part of our core product offering? And that's where we think Silna can operate, is really this infrastructure layer within healthcare that's just clearing all these upfront insurance workflows. And that, I think, as well in tandem can help assist with that billing product. So, I think that's something that will only deepen over time.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, is there anything before I close? Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to make sure you had a chance to talk about?
No, I really enjoyed the conversation today. And, I just say, if you have any questions for us, just please reach out on our website. We get back to you immediately. We're more than happy to jump on a call. And again, I think everything comes down to trust. So you're hearing this, you might be skeptical. Can they actually do this? No one could actually do this. This is such a hard workflow. So reach out to us. Let us prove to you that we actually are experts in this space. And at the very least, maybe we can jump on a call and answer any specific insurance questions that you've been struggling with recently. So really appreciate the time, and hopefully be able to help some other providers in the country as well with this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody listening to this, we'll have it in the show notes, but there's an affiliate page on our website where you can get a extended trial of this, which I take advantage of it. Why not? See how it works. I think it will be very helpful. So yeah, thank you for partnering with us. I really appreciate you giving our listeners that opportunity to try this for a little bit longer while our dog in the background is doing something
waking
weird
from her nap, I guess. I was going to say, and as those who have listened to us for a while know that when we partner with other companies or other individuals, we go through like a thorough vetting process, right? And like I said, as we opened today, we had the great opportunity to get to know Jeff and his team, and we've enjoyed every minute of working together, even if they are insurance people.
I mean, insurance people aren't bad. It's insurance. That's
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I know that you are all super busy, and so thank you for choosing to spend your free time with us here talking to Jeff from Silna. And go check out the show notes and find those links on how to reach out to those at Silna. And if you're laughing at me.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit. Hey, we did talk about insurance for a while. So maybe I can kind of blame it on that. Yeah. Anyway, and if you want, we're on ABA Business Leaders Facebook. Come check us out there. And if you like what you hear, just rate and review.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Hopefully it was helpful. If you would like to gain access to this entire video, and actually our entire library of videos, please join our ABA Business Leaders membership. You can find that at www.3pisquare.com.